Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thursday Talks with Chug. Each week, we cover pressing topics that matter to you and your business. My name is Arianna Gonzalez, tuning in from our San Diego office here at Chug LLP. Please join me in welcoming partner and attorney Diya Mathews from our Edison, New Jersey office. Hi there, Diya, and thanks for being here with us.
Hey, great to be here, Arianna. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. So for today's topic, we will be answering all your pressing questions on the EB-5 visa process. Before we begin, just a quick disclaimer, this conversation is for informational purposes only. It does not create an attorney-client relationship. So if you have any questions, please comment them down below or email us at info@chug.com so we can help you out. Let's get right into it, Diya. Can you tell us what is an EB-5 visa and who is this visa designed for?
Yes, the EB-5 visa program, to put it in a nutshell, is basically a visa program that allows foreign nationals to become eligible for U.S. permanent residency, otherwise known as the green card, by investing in American businesses that lead to the creation of jobs. So it's primarily designed for entrepreneurs and their families who want to live and work in the U.S. And contribute to the economy. There's about 10,000 EB-5 visas issued every year, and a large chunk of it is actually used by nationals from China, but anybody from any country can apply.
Wow, that's so interesting. So if you are listening to this and you're an entrepreneur and you're interested in coming to the US and bringing your family, make sure you're paying attention to this live. So Diya, can you explain the investment requirements for an EB-5 visa?
Yes, and that's probably the most important thing to consider when deciding on whether to go for the EB-5 or not. So each investor must contribute at least a little over 1 million. So it's 1,050,000, 1.05 million. That's the general requirement. Now, in certain areas designated as TAs, and those with high unemployment or rural areas, etc., in those sectors, the investment requirement is a little less. It's about 800,000. And the rule is that you must not just invest, but you must also do an investment that leads to the creation of 10 jobs per investor. The other advantage with this program is that you just need the money, right? The investor doesn't really need to showcase any other prior business experience or education or language qualifications or anything like that. You just have to have this lawful source of funds and invest in the program.
Wow, that's really good to know. So typically you have to contribute around 1 million, but there is some wiggle room for that depending on where you're trying to set it up. So can you tell us what the differences are between investing in a regional center and a direct investment under the EB-5 program? What's the difference between these two?
Right. So there's two ways you can apply or you can invest the EB-5 funds. One is you can have your own business and you can invest in your business. That's what we call the direct investment. And the other is that you invest in a regional center, which is basically a pre-approved project from the USCIS. And the regional centers are usually very large undertakings. They will have big revenue goals and they'll take money from a lot of investors like you. So with the regional center, what you have is a USCIS pre-approved project, and you can find a list of the regional centers approved by USCIS on the USCIS website. And there are certain advantages to doing it through a regional center in that the regional center usually will have a pre-made package for you with their business plan and everything. And they can also count indirect jobs. So remember, we talked about the investment. Your $1 million investment should actually lead to the creation of 10 jobs per investor, right? So when you count the jobs with the regional center, you can count indirect jobs as well. So basically, they don't have to be directly related to the business. You can have indirect jobs created and you can count them. And you can also, just invest the money and sit back. You don't have to be really involved in the running of the business. I mean, with most regional centers, you cannot be involved in running the business. So you pretty much just give them the money and you wait. Whereas with the direct investment, you would be investing and you'd be more involved because it's your own business. And so you would actually be responsible for running the business and creating the jobs. So that's the difference. And both have their advantages and disadvantages. I do have to say that the majority of EB-5 investment that takes place in the United States, that is in the regional center space. So more than 90% of the EB-5 investments are in regional center. And so it's a very small percentage of people that actually choose to do it through the direct investment route, because that's more work. You have to set up your own business. You have to do the investment. You have to be responsible for running the business and for creating the jobs. So those are the two options available.
That's really good to know. And, thank you for sharing that resource, the USCIS website. I know that has a lot of helpful information for people considering this. So I know we have to really pay attention to any new legislations that come out because they can affect the current visa process and the rules that we previously had for them. So can you tell us how recent legislation has affected the EB-5 visa program, if it has at all?
Yes, there have been some significant changes in the last couple of years. So the EB-5 Reform and Integrity Act of 2022, and then before it was passed, there was a little bit of uncertainty in the industry about what's going to happen with the regional center program, etc. But basically, that the 2022 Act has reauthorized the regional center program, and it brought about some changes in the minimum investment amounts required. It's also added some additional compliance measures for regional centers, and some new protections for investors. So that's going to be in effect through 2027. The main changes, I guess, for purposes of our discussion today, the main changes are that the investment threshold went up to account for inflation, and that was a long time coming, right? So earlier, the TEA investment amount used to be 500,000, half a million, and that was within reach for a lot of people. But now that's gone up to 800,000, as we discussed before. And the basic requirement went from 1 million to 1.05 million. So those are the changes in terms of the investment amounts. The other change, which might be relevant for today's discussion, is that earlier you had to wait for the EB-5 petition, the 526 petition, to be approved before you could actually apply for the green card, right? And the green card you would apply through the adjustment of status process if you were lawfully in the US at that time, or you would go for consular processing, which means that you would apply for an immigrant visa at a consulate through the National Visa Center. So you necessarily had to wait for the petition to be approved before you could do that. And the petition approval would take several months or years. But now, with the change in the regulations, it's now possible to file for adjustment of status along with the EB-5 petition. And we call that concurrent filing. So you can do a concurrent filing of the adjustment of status application, the 485 application, if your priority date is correct. And so for folks from India, for example, right now, the EB-5 category is really the only one where the priority date is current at this time, right? Provided you apply in what we call the set-aside category, which is, when your project qualifies for the set-aside visa numbers by virtue of being in a rural infrastructure TEA area, you can actually apply for the 526 and the adjustment of application concurrently. So it's a pretty good option for folks who have the available funds.
Wow, all really important things to keep in mind. If you are watching this and confused about any of these legislation changes, please reach out to us. We'd love to connect you to Diya, and she can help you out with this. So Diya, you mentioned earlier that part of the EB-5 requirement is job creation. Can you tell us exactly what are the job creation requirements for an EB-5 visa investment?
Yeah, you could actually write a book about it, Arianna, but I guess, yeah. So the requirement is that the investment should create 10 full-time jobs for US workers. Now, again, this has to be 10 full-time jobs. So, you can't consider part-time positions. They have to be US workers. So, if you hire people on a visa, like an H4 or an L1 or H1, then that wouldn't count towards the 10 full-time jobs requirement. It has to be permanent residents or US citizens or certain other categories, limited categories that count as US workers. Now, when do these 10 jobs have to be create. They don't have to be created at the time that you're filing the 526 application. At the time you file the EB-5 526 application petition, I should say, you are really just showing that your investment has the potential to create 10 jobs. The actual proof of the pudding, right, in terms of showing that you actually created 10 jobs, that has to be done in the 2 years when the investor gets the conditional permanent resident status. So when the 526 is approved and you file for the green card, you file for the 485 or the consular processing of the immigrant visa, and you come to the US, you come as a conditional green card holder for 2 years. So in the 2 years that you have the conditional green card, that's when you have to show that the 10 full-time jobs have been created.
Wow, great information. So what about if there are multiple investors? So for example, can investments be pulled by multiple EB-5 visa applicants? If so, how does this process work? Can you share some info on that with us?
Absolutely. So multiple investors can definitely pool their money into a single project. In fact, with regional centers, there will be multiple investors for sure. Each investor must invest the required minimum capital, 1 million, 1.05 million, or 800, what have you. And the project must create 10 jobs per investor. So the requirements have to be met per investor.
Okay, so we can't get around the 10 jobs. It has to be per investor. Good to know. That's really great information. So what types of projects are generally considered safe and eligible under the EB-5 program? What are our regulations? Where are our restrictions for this?
It could be any type of project, right? The EB-5 program doesn't set any rules around what kind of a project would qualify. I mean, technically, you could take EB-5 funds for any type of program. But from an investor standpoint, what are considered safe? Again, it's hard to say that because you have to do your own due diligence, and you have to, you could look at what the history of the project is. Do they have strong financial backing? Do they have experienced management? Are they being transparent with you? Is there a clear job creation plan? And usually with the larger projects, like with the regional centers where they have infrastructure projects, real estate developments, large scale business developments, these often do meet the criteria, and they'll have a lot of advisors. You would have to do an independent um, review and see if the project is worth the investment, because again, it's a financial decision, right? As well as giving you the immigration benefit, it is a large financial investment. So treat it as you would with any financial investment of that size, and do the due diligence and then proceed.
Absolutely, such great points, Dia. And if you guys are watching this, we do have CPAs on our team as well. If you have any questions, we'd love to connect you with one of our CPAs to discuss this with you. So I want to dive into the application process a little bit. Can you discuss the steps involved in the EB-5 application process from start to finish?
Sure. So once you determine that you have the funds available and you want to proceed with it, then the process starts with selecting a qualifying EB-5 project, right? So whether it is going to be a regional center or a direct project, with the folks who want to do the direct investment, usually it's an easier decision because they already have the business, and maybe they have the business idea before they consider the EB-5. But if it's a regional center, then you have a lot of options, right? And you have to see which one makes sense for you. Again, going back to what I said earlier about doing your own due diligence. If it's a regional center, then the regional center itself will give you a lot of material, the subscription plan and a lot of information about the project. Then it's just putting together everything to file the application, the form I-526 application. And you should do that with assistance from an attorney. That's always advisable. So, you put together the application materials, and depending on the priority date, the investor could also simultaneously apply for adjustment of status, right? So if it's a regional center, that qualifies, and again, you would have the lower investment requirement, and your priority date might be current if it's in the set aside category. And in that case, along with the 526 application, you can apply for adjustment of status if you're already in the US. Then you wait for the I-526 petition and adjustment of status to be approved. Now, this will take several months. Right now, I believe the USCIS processing times are about 50 months, right? So don't expect that this is going to happen immediately. But if you have been able to file your adjustment of status application along with the 526, then you can continue to be in the US and you would be eligible for an EAD, the work permit, and advance parole for travel purposes, etc. So that gives you a number of interim benefits while you're waiting for the petition to be adjudicated. Once the petition is successfully adjudicated, assuming there's no RFE, etc., and then the adjustment of status application is also approved, that's when you get your residency, your legal permanent resident status, or the green card. Keep in mind, though, that this will be a conditional green card, which means that it is valid for 2 years. And in the 90 days before the green card expires, you have to file the application for removal of conditions, the form I-829.
Wow, all really great information. I appreciate you walking us through that process. So, as most of our audience probably knows, when you do apply for a visa, you're not guaranteed to get that approved. So, what are some of the most common reasons for EB-5 visa rejections, and what can we do? What can we do to avoid being rejected?
Yeah, so some of these issues, they come up at the 526, the initial stage, and some of them could come at the 829 stage when you're applying for the removal of conditions. But the common issues, common, I guess, RFE points that we face at the initial stage, one is the lawful source of funds, right? So especially if you're applying in a regional center, as I said, the main expectation, or one of the, really the only expectation from the investor is that you have to invest funds which are lawfully sourced. And so you may have to go back several levels to demonstrate the source of funds to the satisfaction of the USCIS. If it's a salary income, it's usually straightforward. You have W-2s or you have, salary slips from wherever you are, and you can show. But if you've raised capital by taking loans or selling property, etc., then there's a little more work. Or if there is a loan, then you have to, see who gave you the loan and maybe even talk about how they had the funds in the first place. So the EB-5 program is actually administered by a different unit within the USCIS, the Immigrant Investor Program Office, the IPO. And they have adjudicators who are especially trained for this kind of work. So they know how to, really review and pass through this type of data, and they do a good job. So you have to be very solid in terms of demonstrating the source of the funds that you're investing. The second issue is, failing to demonstrate that the investment will lead to job creation. So if it's at the initial stage, then, you can do it through a business plan, and the business plan has to meet a lot of requirements to satisfy USCIS. So the guiding case law on this is matter of Ho. And that talks about what are the requirements of the business plan, right, to be credible. And so you have to make sure that the business plan really analyzes all the issues, the challenges, opportunities with the business, and talks in a credible way about the number of jobs that will be created. Some of these issues might actually come up at the 829 stage, because of the petition stage, 526 stage, you're still promising that you will do all these things. But at the 829, when you file the application for the removal of conditions, you actually have to show that you met these conditions, or you met all these things, you did all these things that you said you would do. So at the 829 stage, you have to show that the 10 jobs have been created, payroll records, I-9s of all these employees who are hired, etc. So, those are the main things to be careful about. So the only way to do this is by doing the documentation very carefully and choosing reputable projects.
Really great advice on this. And, as Dia mentioned, make sure you have a reputable attorney working with you. Make sure you speak to a few different ones, get to know them, and really trust the attorney that you're working with on this process. So, Dia, we touched on earlier how important it is to stay up to date with any visa policy changes, as, that can definitely change what we plan for the process. So, are there any changes anticipated in the EB-5 visa policy or quotas in the near future that we need to look out for if we're considering this process?
So the program itself is authorized through 2027 at this point. So we should be good on that. But the other thing to be mindful of for attorneys and investors is, potential changes that might happen over time, and also retrogression. Because remember that the availability of visas, right, that depends on how much usage is there. And so the USCIS or the Department of State cannot accurately predict whether the priority dates will go back or will remain current. So, that is something that should be monitored.
Understood. So, how can a potential investor verify the legitimacy of a regional center or EB-5 project? What kind of due diligence does a potential investor have to do for this?
That's a great question. So, and this is something we get from our clients all the time. They ask us to, recommend projects or, suggest something. And legal advisors cannot really advise on the financial viability of any of these projects, right? We are not qualified to do that. Usually, we are not qualified to comment on that. And so, we don't usually endorse any of these projects. Investors should conduct their own due diligence. They can hire financial advisors for this. They should verify the center's USCIS designation, review the track record, examine the project's business plan, and then consult with independent advisors, legal and financial advisors for this. Also, keep in mind that many of these regional centers will not guarantee you a rate of return. Like, I mean, it might be like 1% or so, because that's not, the main idea is not really to get a big return on the investment. It is really, they understand that you're there to get the green card. So they're not going to promise you anything, they're not going to guarantee much of a return.
Those are all really good things to keep in mind. So, what would happen if the EB-5 project fails or doesn't meet the expected job creation targets? What happens then?
Yeah, so the investor is really taking on the risk of the investment, right? So that's why the EB-5 funding investment has to be, done in a certain way. You cannot have a loan, right? You have to really take the risk. So it's usually equity. And so if the project fails, or doesn't meet the job creation requirements, and the investor would not be able to remove the conditions on their residency. So the job creation is really important, right? If you haven't been able to create the 10 jobs, or if you don't have a really good explanation as to why, you are really close to doing it, then the 829 application will probably be denied. But there might be opportunities to reinvest in a new project depending on the circumstances. So, that's something to be considered. And I guess the worst case would be that you don't get your money back if the project fails.
Got it. Can you touch on what the legal implications are if an EB-5 visa is denied? What happens then?
So there are two stages at which you could encounter this. One is the I-526 itself, right? So the I-526 petition that doesn't meet the requirements or doesn't convince the USCIS adjudicator, then they could just deny the initial application itself. Now, if the initial application were to be approved and the investor gets a conditional residency, and they come here and they take up the residency, then after 2 years, you would have to file the application for the removal of conditions, the 829. Now, at the 829 stage, also there is potential for denial if the application is not done properly. So, if you've not been able to demonstrate that you've created the 10 jobs, and the 829 application will be denied, and the conditional resident card would not be renewed.
Wow, great information. So we did touch on family members earlier in the conversation and bringing your family here. So can you explain how that process works? Can family members receive green cards as well through the EB-5 visa investment?
Yes, like with most other visa categories, you would the investor's spouse and children under the age of 21. They can also qualify for derivative green cards along with the investor's application. And one of the advantages with the program is that there might be an advantage under the Child Status Protection Act. So under that, there are certain protections for children if the application is made before they hit the age of 21, and if the priority date stays current throughout. So um, for Child Status Protection Act purposes, the EB-5 often turns out to be a good pathway.
That's really good to know. If you are watching this and have questions about that, reach out to us. We're happy to explain more. Dia, can you touch on the tax implications for EB-5 investors? What does that look like?
Yes, that's a good question and something to be considered, not just for the EB-5, but with most other applications for a green card. Once the EB-5 application and the adjustment of status, or the immigrant green card is approved for the applicant, they become U.S. tax residents, which means that they are subject to their worldwide, they're subject to taxes in the U.S. on their worldwide income, right? So at that point, or before that, you should consult with a tax advisor to understand the implications and plan accordingly. So if you have a lot of money or a lot of income worldwide, this becomes very relevant, and you might want to get good tax counsel before you take up the green card.
Absolutely, and we're happy to help you out with that. If you have any questions on the tax information, we were happy to set you up with one of our tax advisors. So, Dia, what happens to the EB-5 investment if the applicant decides to return to their home country? Is this allowed?
So the relevant question there is what happens to the green card if the applicant returns to their home country. And so there is a lot of guidance out there on how to maintain the green card. If you are away from the US for too long and without good reason, then the green card or your permanent residence is deemed to be abandoned. And so there are ways to avoid this. Um, and so the best way obviously is to maintain your residence or your domicile in the US and not be away for too long. And if you need to travel a lot or you need to be away from the US for a substantial amount of time, then discuss with an attorney on how to maintain your status, your residency status.
That's really important to keep in mind. Make sure you are able to maintain your residency status. So, Dia, what kind of due diligence should applicants perform before committing to an EB-5 investment?
Yeah. So again, as we discussed earlier, we look at the project's financial health, their compliance, their history, very important. If it's a big regional center and they've taken a lot of investments, look at, you can ask them how many of your cases have actually gotten approved, what is your approval rate, etc. So, and look at the management, is it professionally managed, and things like that.
All really great insights. Thank you, Dia. We are almost out of time, but I have one more question for you. What advice would you give to somebody who is just starting to explore the possibility of an EB-5 visa?
I would say invest in a good consultation, in a solid consultation with an experienced immigration attorney who handles EB-5 cases. Just because the EB-5 investment amount is so high and you are going to be spending a lot on it, right? It's not just the investment of 1 million. It's also most regional centers would have an admin fee, then there's attorney fee. So you are actually going to be spending a lot of money. So invest in a good consultation with an experienced attorney. And after that, speak with financial advisors to understand and do a proper risk assessment of the project. And then take your time, research the regional centers, and ensure a good fit and compliance with the USCIS requirements.
Wonderful insights. Thank you so much for your time and all of these amazing answers and information, Dia. I really appreciate it. This does bring us to the end of our conversation. Thank you everyone for joining us today. To stay up to date, please subscribe and follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. If this video was helpful, please make sure to give it a like and share it with your friends. If you have any questions or suggestions, please feel free to send us an email anytime at info@chew.com. Let us know what topic you want to see next, and make sure to join us back here next next week for more pressing topics that truly matter to you and your business. Until next time, stay safe and take care, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Diya.
Thank you.